Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the podcast. Today, we're very lucky to be speaking to Simon Lewis, the man who turned around the Old Palm Beach from a branded hotel to an independent hotel. And Simon and I met at the Boutique Lifestyle Hotel Summit in London just a week ago, at the beginning of the month. And he gave a fantastic presentation, at which point I said, Simon, could I interview you? Because I think it's wonderful stuff. So, Simon, welcome to the podcast. I've got some questions for you, but could you just give me a brief introduction of sort of your journey, especially regarding the O in Palm Beach?
Sure, absolutely. Well, our parent business bought the property as a branded Ritz-Carlton hotel probably about 12 or 13 years ago now. And things are great. Things were going well, strong economy, strong market, all this, that, and the other. And a great property, needed some renovation, a few bits and pieces needed doing to, really help it fly. And it did reasonably well, but not as well as we felt it could do with independent management. So, long story short, we made the tough decision to go from being branded to being independent. And because of the way things worked out with the process and Florida law, we basically had only 30 days to change the management completely from branded to independent, which is tough enough when you just consider the physical aspects of, ordering flags with new designs on or stationery and so on and so forth. But there was the whole human element of it, the whole engagement side, which was a real challenge, a real exercise, and actually a huge opportunity for us, which worked out extraordinarily well at the end.
In the talk you gave us lots of great information and pointers at the event, and we can't sort of go back through all that. But what, in your view, was the three greatest challenge that you faced in this staff that you had running in the previous role, and now you're going to have running your new enlightened role, if you like, or independent role? What were the three greatest challenges that you saw that absolutely engaging these employees in your new vision and your new brand?
Okay, well, first and foremost, and written in capital letters, was trust. Trust from the employee's perspective, because you can imagine people who've been working, in some cases, for over 20 years with, a household name brand, who literally told from one day to the next that their employment has ended, that the brand that they know and love and been working for loyally for many, many years is suddenly out of date, completely gone. And, the rug is literally pulled out from under you. You can imagine what it'd be like if your employment suddenly ended overnight, literally. You have bills to pay, mortgages, medical insurance, car repayments, all of the usual things.
And this is because that strange element of Florida law, which I can't remember what you called it, but those are...
Right. So it turns out that in Florida there's a type of employment, or the basis of employment over there is called at will, something that's unique to the state and maybe other states around America, but something completely alien to us here in the UK. And it literally means that legally you're entitled as an employer to end somebody's employment one day, and there's absolutely no recourse.
Wow.
So what happened to them is at 5 o'clock one day they were told, that's it, today's your last day. And there's nothing that you can do about it. It's utterly bizarre.
So nothing like toupee or anything like where we have the protection here. It's just boom, dead.
Nothing like that at all. How anybody chooses to work in that environment, how they choose to stand for it as a workforce in the state of Florida, I have no idea. And it's just one of the peculiarities. But, whenever you work in different territories around the world, there are always going to be peculiarities. And complete aside, if you ever want to choose to work somewhere else, you really need to know what the local issues are going to be. Anyway, that's what it was. So the rug was pulled out from under people's feet. So trust literally went out the window. Now, quite what people felt about the old employers is, perhaps a story for another day. But as far as we were concerned, we were the ones who triggered the change, and therefore we were the ones not to be trusted, even though suddenly we needed 500 new employees and there were 500 employees available to be hired the very next day. So people were nervous, people were scared, people were skeptical, and we had to work very, very hard at the very beginning to even get people to want to consider to be employed.
How many sorry to interrupt, but how many of those 500 stayed?
It turned out that the vast majority did. It was, I don't have the specific number to hand, but it was in excess of, it was around about 90%.
I think, was it 92% that you said necessarily? So it was that figure, that's the thing,
Well,
I didn't remember.
Okay, so 90% stayed, but of the 90% that did stay, 92% said that they were disengaged and mistrustful.
Actually, that was you got that communication from. So.
Right, absolutely. Because, one of the first things we did as part of our engagement project, try and get people back on track, is we needed a starting point. So we needed to do a survey and said, okay, well, where are you now? What's your mindset right now? What do you think going forward? Because after the project, we wanted to be able to look back and say, we'd moved from here to here, and so that was a good job, well done. So we knew at the very beginning, after we'd signed the new employees up, that of the ones who'd chosen to stay with us, 92% were disengaged. Now, if you think about starting a new business from scratch with a completely blank sheet of paper and getting everything done in exactly the way you want to have it done in an ideal world, that would be the way you'd start.
This is, I think, a very key point, because actually what you ended up with, and I think this is one of the reasons that for me it's so valuable to talk to you and get your input, is because in many hotel businesses, if you're going on and starting a hotel from scratch, the people that come to join you are excited about this new thing. It is a new project. When you take over a hotel, or you buy a hotel, or I've just been talking to a hotel group that's just bought a hotel, which is in, almost in the situation you are, but it's not distrustful of the new employee, the new owners. It's actually just distrustful of, anything. They just got really to that low point. So you brought people back from the brink.
Well, we did, and I'm pretty proud about what we did. And I've got to tell you that as we look forward from where we are now, one of the goals that we started with when we knew that we needed to re-engage employees was to say, well, listen, let's fast forward a little bit. Let's imagine that we're at some point in the future, we've turned it around, we've got people on our side, but more than that, let's think about how we want new hires to think about joining our business in the future. And we decided at that point that our goal for new hires, once things had stabilized, would be they would be so excited about the prospect of joining our business that they almost couldn't sleep the night before their very first shift. And we've achieved that. But back to your original question, our first big challenge was trust. Our second big challenge was uncertainty, because with mistrust becomes, I'm hearing what I'm being told, but do I really believe it? And that's slightly different from trust, although there's an element of mistrust within it. It's, will the brand succeed? Do I believe in the brand? Can I actually make a career of this now things have changed? Maybe there's going to be cost cuts. Maybe there's going to be a whole range of things that go on as part of the whole corporate process of being in business that are different from how they were when I was employed by that other company yesterday, that perhaps are just not going to go the way I would like or expect, and so on. So you've got that whole uncertainty.
So, and that uncertainty is, you use the word, your vision. I think this is one of the things that many independent hotels, and especially the smaller ones, that the unique brands that are just an owner's bought it or trying to develop it or grow it, is they very poorly express their vision to their staff. So that actually the staff have that level of uncertainty. They don't have the certainty that this is where the ship's going, this is my role, this is what I can contribute. They just miss that bit out somehow. Now, of course, in our case, we'd only had 30 days to create an entire new direction for the business. So although we were pointing in a certain direction, I wouldn't say that our vision was fully formed at that point. But in relation to established businesses, what we've discovered is that naturally businesses find themselves in different philosophies. So in other words, with different visions. And that's partly based on the ownerships, partly based on management, it's partly based on attitude, it's partly based on market conditions. So for example, you could be in a business that's more than happy to be quite stable and sit wherever the niche is, and it's an area of comfort. You're happy to be number one or number two or whatever it is. You don't really want to see things change too much. And by the way, in hotels that's important, because just in terms of service standards,
consistency is always going to be key. Or you might be in a business whose attitude is, you know what, we want to be the best. We want to lead the field. We want to find out what's coming over the horizon. We want to be ahead of the game. We want to ensure that we take the bull by the horns. That's a different mindset. Equally, you could find yourself in a business that's under great challenge. Maybe there's a step change in the pipeline. Maybe there is a change of management. And that, by the way, that could even be as simple as a new GM. But whatever it is, it's knowing that whatever we're doing today, we know that we've got to do something very different tomorrow. And all of those things have got an uncertainty element to it. But more than that, there's what you might call a brand direction and an attitude and a style of business. And knowing which one of those three your business is really allows you as an employer to work with the teams around you to get the best out of them.
I think work I've done recently with people is just, if you don't have that clarity of even the broad picture, I'm not saying the big picture, but the broad picture, even it hasn't been defined closely, that this is what we're trying to be, this is what we're trying to achieve, this is where we're going, this is how we want to be seen in the world, what we want to be known for as a business. If you can articulate that to people, then what they start to be able to see is they start to either engage with it or disengage with it. And it's actually that Marmite effect you want. You want them to say, yeah, I'm in or I'm out. Because if they're out, and great. It doesn't mean they're a bad person, it just means they're not on your side.
Right. So this is also one of the things that we learn, because you're absolutely right. It's all about the fit. It's all about a square peg in a square hole, because any other shape isn't going to work. Now, if you just think about those three examples, whether it's a stable business or a forward-thinking business or a business that's undergoing change, whichever it is, you're naturally going to have people in the business, or that you want to have in the business, they're going to fit that particular style of operation. So if you've got a business that needs to go through change, and that's right for those particular circumstances, but you're populated by people, for whatever reason, that don't like change, that's going to be difficult.
And it's really interesting when you meet owners of businesses that realise they have to change, and actually they're the ones that are terrified of changing. And it can really you get this breakdown of the relationship between them and the staff, because suddenly they become the barrier. Like the brand was the barrier for you guys, if you like.
Right, and this is what I find utterly bizarre, really, in business, because, sentient beings, if you believe Darwin and the survival of the fittest and all of this sort of thing, we're naturally attuned to adaptation. It's how we survive. So if we're so good at adapting, if we are so good at adapting, why don't we like change? It's a paradox.
It's a paradox, but I think it's very simple to explain in one level, is that, just like employees are uncertain of the outcome, we could talk about Brexit and go, everyone's uncertain about the outcome, whichever line you're following on, but it's like, because we are uncertain about something, if we don't have the emotional intelligence to go out and grab the challenge and run with it, what we're naturally going to do is actually just back away. Now, depending on how far we back away is how much we're uncertain. So often you might just sort of lean back a bit and wait to see what happens, or you run for the door. Unfortunately, most employees in that situation lean back a bit, but they stay leant back and their performance just drops, and you end up with passenger employees which don't really do your business any good. But they may be good passenger employees, but they're not supporting the whole change. Okay, so what was the third thing? So trust, uncertainty.
Well, it was really brand direction. So knowing where the business is going, and then ensuring that as you move forward, you can build a team, shape a team, adapt a team for that style of operation.
Now, what you said it in a bit, you did a survey. So the symptoms in many respects of the problem was you did a survey and they went, we're uncertain, we don't trust you. So that was quite helpful. But what other symptoms did you notice along the way that you had to sort of deal with, that helped you realise what the specific challenges were?
Okay, so in our case, we went from branded to unbranded, or from a different brand to the brand that we were introducing. So there were two parts of that. One was was what you might call the unwinding of the old brand, where their style of operation, their standards, and whatever it was very clear cut, but it wasn't what we were doing. So what we had to do is we had to get people to stop doing that old thing, following those old SOPs, and starting to do ours. Now, irrespective of what ours were, we noticed in the initial period that employees just got stuck, because they would go, well, in this particular service situation, I know that ordinarily I should have been doing such and such. Now I've got to do something else. Now, I may know what that other thing is, and I'd be happy to do it and capable of doing it, but I've got to go through this mental adjustment, this mindset. And people it was a bit like seeing computers crashing. You get to a point, the screen freezes, and, until you reset it and it wakes up again and does it the right way. People were literally getting stuck in the middle of service. And that took time to unwind. So, what that demonstrates is how good and how well embedded the old brand was. But it also showed us how much time and effort we needed to go through to allow that transitionary process to take place. Now, if you've got nothing to replace it with, the computer stays crashed.
Well, that's that point when those employees who may have been really good in the previous system, now they're in the new system, and actually that breakdown or crash, whatever you call it, they move out of being a contributing employee or a proud passenger, and they end up going towards being an indifferent passenger, or in really bad circumstances end up becoming a maverick or even a terrorist in your organisation. Somebody who's championing the old brands and going, well, why don't you carry on doing this? Because it worked before. And they can be so corrosive.
And there's always going to be an element of that, because you replace one SOP with another, and then, eventually you stop doing this one and you've learnt this one, so that's great. Until somebody goes, yes, but I don't like point 3 in this new SOP. We didn't do it in the old ways. You know what, I'm an industry professional. I've been doing this for 20 years. I know how it should be done, and I think the old way was the best way. Now, they might have been right, and there's always going to be a point of view around it. Equally, they may have been wrong. But these are the things that you have to take into account. So how do you do that? Well, you need people on board. You've got to have people who are prepared to believe your particular version.
And did you start sort of with the senior management and sort of talk that vision down? I mean, where I do work with people is we have a behaviour standards workshop we do, which is actually getting the senior management to sort of talk about the outcome they want from the guest to experience this particular outcome, and work it back to, well, if that's the outcome we're going to do, then these are the standards we've got to deliver. And then we repeat that at different levels down through the organisation. Now, what actually ends up happening is the next level down, you tweak it a bit. The next level down, you tweak it less. The next level down, you tweak it less. But the same thing happens with each group, is that they realise how they can deliver it themselves. So it sort of helps change their mindset. The question I was going to ask next was that once you've done that, do you notice then you have elements or processes that are missing in management that you need to put in place to sustain the movement?
Right. So a few things around that. Firstly, what you need is complete answers. And here's why, and what we do in our workshops, we write up on the flip chart. What we say is, lunch won't always be served, which is a really useful sentence which demonstrates that you can have half a dozen people sitting around a table who all agree that at the end of the meeting that lunch won't always be served. But it means anything you want it to mean. So it's open for interpretation. You mean we're not doing it today? You mean sometimes we will serve it, sometimes we won't? Maybe it's a buffet, maybe it's silver service. There are so many different interpretations, and it's just illustrative of the fact that people will take away from these interactions, from these instructions, from these directions, actually whatever they want to. And that's not a failing, it's just human nature. So, whenever you're going to try and communicate, and even if you want to start with the top-down approach, which is very good in this case, in this sort of situation initially, you've got to be able to give enough information, enough examples, so that the people who are going to go out and be your message ambassadors, your brand ambassadors to lower levels of staff, Get it right first time, because otherwise what you'll end up with is Chinese whispers. You thought there's a really, really sharp and concise message at the bottom, but by the time it's gone through 2 or 3 iterations, it's exactly something completely different when it's rolled out to.
And also, did you find that, you know, at this level of management, let's say, or the supervisor level of management, the interpretation of the standard for their role was slightly different to the next level up, because obviously they're doing a different function. So the actual expression of that service brand, or that brand service, might be slightly different. But then there comes a point where you've got to the lowest level of supervisor, and now it's the delegation of the actual person who's putting the plate on the table. That person also has to figure out what it means to them. Did you find that problem?
Yeah. That's absolutely right. And actually this is the key to how we became so successful at this so quickly. It's not so much the words, although they're important. It's not so much the message, although that's important. It's how people experience that information so that they themselves can understand it in their own particular way. So, you know, for example, in the same way that the words on the page or on the flip chart will be different to different people, it's that interpretation that will be taken off in any number of different directions to create different executions. So what we had to do was actually have people process the information themselves in a way that brought up the correct answer from an actional perspective.
And would you agree with me? I'm not trying to put words in mind, but let me put a thought to you. That I think when you are in heavily branded situations where there is a rule book almost of what you will do and what you won't do, that I think in the presentation you said something along the lines of, you know, the brand actually aren't there to worry about how it all executes. They want it done their way because they just want your money. Whereas you're going, oh, we want to continually do it better. Like they've got their brand book and it's that set of rules and you go and play that game every single day. So your member of staff that's been taught how to do that and really is good at doing that, when you then come and say, now how are you interpreting that? How are you going to contribute to that? How are you going to bring you as a person to that? They sort of go, huh? No, I just want to be told what to do.
Right. So look, the big box brands are really good at what they do. What they do is having a cookie cutter approach. So that physically they look the same, operationally they look the same, and so on and so forth. Fantastic. So if you stay at such and such hotel in London, it's the same as the such and such hotel in Berlin or Philadelphia or whatever it is. No problem at all. But with that, if that's your approach, and it can be really, really efficient, but it does come with issues which perhaps don't suit other people's style of operation. And what we found in relation to that was that firstly there was an over-reliance in the physical plant, which means that if a certain outlet or certain physical or certain area of the hotel, a certain department wasn't working, the solution was always, from a big brand perspective, is do a renovation of that space. So if the restaurant's underperforming, renovate the restaurant. It's obvious. Well, only in a big box environment, because part of that brand model is to take away thought. And I mean that in a positive way. So from an operational perspective, there's a rule book for everything, there's a style of doing everything, and in any given situation, there's a service response. And that means you can control it, but it also means it's completely vanilla, because they have to be able to repeat it everywhere.
And I think when you described it at the event, is, you know, the limitations of big brand is that everything is controlled, but you also were talking about this, you know, there are benefits of it which you don't have as an independent, all the big buying power, all that sort of stuff, because now you're an independent. But the most common thing I find in the big brand hotels is if you go outside of their rule book as the customer, you ask for something outside, you know, it is the classic computer says no. Whereas if you're an independent hotel, when I ran my own hotel, we had this all the time, where it was the customer would ask something that wasn't on the menu, not in the restaurant, but in the property, and the staff would always just make it up. because they had permission to use all of their skills, passion, knowledge, talents and abilities to help me exceed our guest expectations every time they visited. And often I didn't even know these things had been done, but they had so clear in view of what I wanted the guests to feel that they would go and do something on their own bat that made it and then tell me about it later. I'm going, hey, brilliant, well done.
So that's exactly the advantage that you can have if you choose to go the independent route, because you can then create a service style that suits your attitude towards business and suits the particular clients you've got in your hotel, in your corner of the world, that's unique to the way you want to do things, rather than a blanket approach that works across the chain. So when you take that alongside the fact that probably your biggest operating cost is your payroll, and therefore your biggest expenditure every year is not the cost of renovating rooms or restaurants or whatever, because that part isn't working well. It's actually taking your employees and turning them into assets for the business, because they deliver not just the style of business that you want them to deliver, but they deliver it in a way that's good for the guests. The way they do that is through hospitality. Now, let me just be very clear on my attitude towards hospitality. It's not about just running a hotel. It's about making that personal connection between me and you. You're the guest, I'm the one delivering the service. And the reason that you're going to come back to my hotel is because you feel good in my hotel. The reason you feel good in my hotel is not because of the colour of the carpet, because the fact that I've redecorated the hallways recently. It's because it's populated by people that share your enthusiasm for the type of stay that you want to have and deliver a type of service that fits you as an individual, that's not cookie-cutted or rigid in a box, that's delivered to any number of thousands upon thousands of customers repeated around the world.
There's something you were talking about the marketing, about having to stand out and you're recreating your brand. But I think for how I operate, how I think about business and hospitality specifically, or hospitable service in any business, 70% of the guest experience comes down to your people. Yeah, the product, the quality and all that is important, but it's only about 30% of actually what the guest takes away. What they take away is that connection.
Right, I completely agree. So when we were filling in those unknown answers about our brand direction, creating this formula for our business, we ensured that as we created the values around our brand and the beliefs that not only we had as a business and how we wanted to do business, but beliefs that our employees could get to grips with to rebuild that trust. It was all around the hospitality side of it. So for example, in our value set, our employees are called hoteliers, because hoteliers is a professional label that's perhaps not used as much as it once was, but really demonstrates not so much a level of seniority, but more towards an attitude around hospitality. And with things like authentic and goosebumps, which are also part of our value set, as well as intuitive, these are all about being able to use your own personality. Because, frankly, we hired you because you've got great personality. So the last thing you want to do is deprogram that and then give you a rule book of things to say in given situations. So you're a professional, you've got a personality, you're great at what you do. How about we actually let you do that? We'll give you some pointers and some directions about, you need to be smartly dressed and turned out and things you absolutely can't say and stuff like that. But we want you to have a positive mindset that allows you to be you and do great service that's specific to the guest that's in front of you.
As you do that, I think my experience, especially in my own hotel and working with clients, is when you do that and people actually get that you are giving them permission to do something, what happens is you establish a completely different relationship where the relationship suddenly becomes a collaborative relationship. They start to trust you because actually you're allowing them to do stuff. I talked to Lorenzo Giannuzzi from the Forte Village in Sardinia. He's been there for 20 years. Fantastic man to meet. So generous of his time as well. But the one thing he does is management by walking. So they don't have management meetings. They're going around and they're seeing their staff performing on the floor. And when they see their staff do something really well, they're appreciating them. And if they see them struggling, they sort of go over and they say, is there everything okay? Is there anything you need? What are you challenged by? So there's this continual conversation that's going on that people feel safe to try, and they know that their management have got their back, and so it generates this contributing group of people that are contributing for the vision you have for your guest. I'd call it the natural order of people.
Right.
Like,
So, yeah. So you've used that magic word again, trust, because at the beginning, if you recall, what I said was it was working against us because of what happened in the past. Okay, so we realised that the best way to rebuild the trust was for us to entrust the operation of our hotel to our great hoteliers. Why? Because they're professional hoteliers, they know how to do it. So actually trusting them allowed them to trust us. And as with that story you were just telling, we've had situations in other properties in the past and with other businesses where you need to have a really important management suite of offices where the managers can hide in their offices behind desks and never need to go out and walk the hotel corridors. This is absurd when you think about it, because hoteliers need to be out in front of guests and management need to see what's going on all the time. And who've got the best operational ideas about how we can improve things? Well, people on the shop floor, people who do the jobs day-to-day, on a day-to-day basis, who need to be able to communicate their great ideas up through the ranks to the people that need to hear those answers. And the only way you get to do that is by having management out on the shop floor.
Also, by doing that, and it was a lesson I learned early on in my hotel career, was we all have perceptions about members of staff, about people we work with. And actually, we tend to normally relate to the perception of that person and actually not the person. That's what we do all the time, right?
Right.
And I had a situation where a member of staff actually was someone who I thought could leave and I'd be really happy, I'd probably celebrate. I thought he was a sort of a non-committed passenger until I needed him to do something really well. And he did it so well, it knocked my perception out. And I had to take a refresh look at him. He became one of my most trusted and supporting members of staff because he was excellent. But I had a perception about him that he was a whinging, moaning, boring bear, and nothing was going to get in to prove me different until this thing happened. I went, oh my God. And I took a fresh look at all my staff then.
Right. So it's what we call perception is projection. So in other words, you project your bias, whatever that may be, onto that person, and therefore, in your mind, that's what that person becomes.
And it could be, you think they're fantastic, but they're not, because they just happen to really do everything in front of you when it's the right time, but actually, as soon as you're not looking, they're doing a terrible job. And I had a situation like that, but, you just, as a manager, we've got to realise that that's what we have to get out of the way the whole time. We also have to rip it up the whole time to generally see what they're doing.
So in that respect, we've spent a lot of our time with our senior management on what I call limiting beliefs. Because, people get to where they are because of their experience and the decisions they made, which, of course, in the main are great. But what an independent needs to do, what somebody who needs to take their business forward needs to be aware of, is what people will call reasons, what I call excuses. And there could be many, many valid reasons why something could not be done or should not be done. But the reason that a manager or an owner needs to be careful is if that reason, if that excuse is actually just a limiting belief or a limiting decision.
And I think we have, and at all levels, I think it's one thing for people who come up through business and get promoted to their new roles, and they don't realise the complexity's changed. And then this limiting belief comes on and it puts in a bit of fear and doubt, and then that gets reinforced, and then maybe they don't perform very well, so it gets reinforced again, and they might then leave. But when they go to the next property, they carry that limiting belief with them.
Right, and then they're going to say things like, oh, well, that doesn't work in my experience. Whereas maybe it could have worked if they'd actually figured out what the real problem preventing it from working was. And so this is why I'm actually fascinated in the mindsets behind how people do this. And this is why when it came right down to it with our solution in Florida, it was really about hearts and minds. And having that independent mindset for us, which was initially that big change from going from a brand mindset to an independent mindset, was a challenge, but also the secret to the success. So part of it was procedural and process and so on. Part of it was a vision, clearly. Big part of it, though, was the attitude towards figuring out what the right solution could be and should be and what we need to do to create that. Whereas in the past it was, if it's not in the rule book, it's not possible. We won't even have a discussion.
Did you find that was a collaborative process, that once your staff were starting to trust you, they actually came on board and became part of the solution? Yeah.
So how did we do that? Well, in all sorts of different ways. For myself personally, as owner, what I would do whenever I'd go to the property is I'd take time to spend as much time as I could with employees. So I would do drop-in sessions. So on any given day, at certain times during the day, would know where to be. There's no fixed program, no fixed agenda, but if they wanted to just come and ask or hear about something or learn a bit more direct from the horse's mouth, they were able to do that. But I also got involved in different projects. So, for example, I'm really into photography and so on, so I would do a lot of photo shoots at the hotel. And I had people assist me. So it wasn't so much about the taking the photos, it was more about the team spirit of taking a project that's not really directly about running the business, but it's got business reasons around it. But during the course of the half day or the full day, we could actually get our teeth into something meaty. And whilst we're moving along the path of that project, have a laugh and a joke and a collaboration. And you know what? Turns out he's a human being. Some people get surprised that I'm a human being too. So we've actually got quite a common. And the point about that is you get this team spirit that's very different from an owner or a manager just sort of walking around looking important and you mustn't approach and all this sort of stuff. And just in all sorts of ways. I mean, when I was there a few weeks ago, I was quite interested in how one of the dishes that our chef creates. So she gave me a cookery lesson, how she actually does it. And that was just about building up a bond, about having a shared passion for whatever that dish happened to be, but in a way that, do you know what? I know what my job is, I know what your job is, and I do mine, you'll do yours, and that's fine, and we'll put in the time and effort and be measured accordingly. But we're here because we actually enjoy that thing, which is hospitality. I mean, your way, my way. Do you know what? We can have a bit of fun around that and actually get that spirit, that engagement, and that mutual respect for that umbrella subject in a way that builds that bridge, builds that trust, builds that connection. And next time I go, we'll have a bit of fun over it.
There's a model I use always about relationships, a relationship framework, that every relationship has a specific purpose for you with the employee and for the employee with you. And that purpose then creates a dynamic. And the dynamic is how you engage, how you talk to each other, how often you talk to each other, the sorts of things you can accept each other doing. And as that relationship gets better and better, the level of permission within the relationship for you to challenge a member of staff, not as in challenge them in a negative way, but set them a positive challenge or ask them to come up with a solution or ask them to engage, deepens, and you end up with somebody who is a complete resource. They see you as a resource, and you see them as a resource, and they then help you build the brand because they really are into it.
Right. and my view is that you need to be flexible with your behaviour because different situations call for different skill sets and approaches. And so, at times I go from fulfilling a lead role to fulfilling a support role. So what does that mean? Well, if there's a direction that we really need to take the business, and I need to lead that charge. And by the way, I've got to be seen to lead it from the front. Otherwise, nobody's going to buy into it in my version.
I think that's true.
Yeah. At other times, my attitude is, look, I don't have 500 people who are there for me. I mean, obviously, the reason for having the hotel is to make money. We all get that. But they're not there for me. Actually, I'm there for them. Because if there's something that's preventing them getting the results that they need, I need to know what that is and figure out if there's a way of removing that problem. Or if there's a market opportunity that they've identified that we're not exploiting, they need to bring it to me to tell me. So in that same way, on a day-to-day basis, I would not expect in a meeting people to sit around the table and just nod enthusiastically whenever I say something really important. Actually, what I want them to do is challenge it. I want them to question it, and I want their serious input, because if they're prepared to put up their hand and say, actually, here's something important that you need to know that you haven't thought of yet, I'd rather know it now than after the fact.
And when you develop a relationship that has that level of trust, understanding, collaboration, what that level of permission you've got is to say, please, I've got a problem. It's two things. I have a little course which I let people have for free, which is all about setting expectations, measurements, and follow up with staff. And a young lady started a beauty salon. After 9 months, she's cash positive, doing great. And anyway, she went and read this through and went through the exercises. And at the end of it, she said to me, do you know what this has taught me? I said, what's that? She said, it's fine to ask my staff questions about my business. I don't have to know all the answers. And I think when an owner gets that, or a leader gets that about any business, suddenly the people see them and respect them as this person with this vision, and they're the holder of the vision. But they also realise that they can contribute, but they know how they can contribute because they know where it's all going. And I think that the way you talked about the hotel at the conference last week was this: you really put up this amazing vision, and you got people to believe in it, and you got people to trust you, and you now developed this culture. My sort of final question to you really was, now that you've got there, you've developed this brand, what are the greatest challenge you see as keeping that performance and that engagement as it is now, or improving it?
To be honest, it's hiring the right people. That is to say, hiring people that are the right fit. And it's a frustration I used to have in being hotels, that you'd hire someone because they were a warm body and you had no care. And because you're going to give them a rule book with everything in it, eventually you'd be fine. You're not fine. And here's why. It's because of what I was referring to earlier, and you were just talking about, it's that experiential element. Because if you want people to support you and trust you, they've got to have skin in the game. They've got to have that shared vision with you. They've got to be happy enough, hopefully, more than that, hopefully passionate about the direction that you're taking the business in. And the only way they'll do that is if they get personal satisfaction out of it. And the way they'll get satisfaction out of it is because of that shared spirit, that shared vision. And, you might be marketing, I might be accounting, and so on, and we've got very different disciplines, and I don't understand you and you don't understand me because we've got completely different models of the world and the way we run. You
just pick the two most sort of combative natures, accounting and marketing. It's like
about it is, if I understand the passion for the business and you understand the passion for the business, then we can move forward in the same direction. But we have to have that personal experience of the passion, because otherwise it's just words on a PowerPoint, it's just words on the screen. And too many times, and we've all had this, we've sat in a room of some sort or another where somebody stands up at the front and shows you words, and people kind of go, well, I've read the word and I get what you're trying to do, but I don't really connect with it. We create that connection. The way that starts is by understanding what you want out of a particular role. And obviously there's skills-based, definitely. But there's a personality element to it. And finding the right personality for that role, for that department, and also for the business is going to get you the biggest win further down the line. Because it's going to be far more efficient to take on somebody who's right than somebody who isn't quite right. And that's where I was talking about square pegs and square holes earlier on. And not only will that get you a better day-to-day result, but it also ensure that those people are more likely to stay with you long-term. And then once you've done that, is to ensure they're settled into the business well. So, for example, with our new hires, we've got like a 90-day buddy system, whereby any dumb question and all the rest of it, you've got an immediate resource that you can go to for that initial period of support. But the interim piece is the way we do our employee orientation. As I was saying earlier, our goal was to have people so excited about their orientation or the outcome of the orientation. They can't wait to get to work. We're a business that's only about 2.5 years old. We're starting to win awards for our orientation because they're so different. And they're different because the outcome is people, they don't just read the word, they don't just understand the word, but they feel the passion for the business, and it creates that personal identity. So our challenge was ensuring, and the challenge going forward is to ensure that as we move forward, people enter the business for the right reasons, and they engage with the business because of how we set that first piece up. And I know it costs time, it takes time and it costs money, but it's really, really worthwhile to get a loyal workforce who are with you every single day from that point forward. So it actually saves us money.
You mentioned earlier that the big brand perspective is if the restaurant isn't working, refurbish it. It probably won't work, but refurbish it. And I always look at how we invest in properties, and going back to that 70-30% split between the people and the product, if you like, is that actually when you get it right, what is happening is the employee is coming to work knowing that they're going to be, engaged in a solution. And although it costs you time and it costs you money and it takes time, the investment you make in people in that arena, by building the trust, by really getting them to be inside the vision, and then exiting people who don't get it, which is fine, because not everyone's going to get it, but that is the best investment you can make in a business. I call it ROI, little IP, return on investment in people. And it's the best return you can get.
I completely agree with that, because not only, one of my interview questions, if you were interviewing with me, is I ask, what's the very last thing you said to yourself this morning before you got out of bed? And if you say, I need to do something, it tells me a lot about your personality. If you say, I want to do something, it also tells me a lot, but I'd rather have somebody who wants to do something than needs to do something. And in the context of running our business, which is a hotel, I want people who are so passionate about service, who are so passionate about finding solutions, who are so passionate about not just working cohesively together in the business as a group of hoteliers, but are communicating that to their guests all the time, that it becomes hugely efficient. Not just for the reason you said in terms of working collaboratively as a team, but there's a huge marketing benefit, because people come to our hotel because of our employees. And I put it like this. So look, here's a bunch of money. We could go out and build a great hotel. Maybe we'll find a lovely beach to put it on. Maybe we'll build a spa and some great rooms and a real 5-star environment and make it a deluxe property. But you know what? There are a lot of deluxe properties on the planet. There are great beaches, great hotels, and all the rest of it. Lovely spas. Why is ours any different? Everybody's competing on the same level. But there's only one thing that our hotel has that no other hotel on the planet has got, and that's our employees. And our employees create the right environment for guests. And we actually measure our success the number of times our employees get name checks in places like Trip.
And by doing that, it's funny that the simple element of it is your employees are creating this environment for the guests. What you as management have done and what you've achieved, you are creating this environment where your employees are coming to play your game, which is delivering that service, that experience to the customer. But you've designed the game and they've come to play. And hopefully, if you call the game tennis, right, nobody's turning up in rugby boots.
And we do it from the inside out, and we really think we have a formula. So much so that on the back of what we've managed to succeed in Florida, which is go from worse than zero in under 3 years, that 92% against is now 88% fully engaged in the business, which I think in any metrics is really, really good. We got our 5th star, 5 diamond. As I said, we're winning engagement awards all the time now. And from a human employee and performance perspective, it's been a real success story, to the extent that I've actually created something called the Mindsmith Group, which is service-based initiative to offer the same skills and services to other hospitality businesses in the UK and elsewhere around not just presenting the skills, but actually training on-site teams to be able to deliver those results in any situation, in any environment, so that they're ready to go at a moment's notice.
I think where you and I have a commonality there is the thing we both share is this idea that actually the hidden gold mine in any business is not how much money I spend on my property, although that's important. It's actually how much time and effort I invest in eliciting all the skills, passion, abilities and desires and knowledge from my staff to help me transform my vision for my business into reality. And that to me, there's not enough of it happening.
I completely agree. There's not nearly enough happening, and the way I see it is, as soon as you take away those limiting beliefs in a positive way, replace them with, well, just suppose kind of mentality. What would actually happen if we could solve? How could we solve that approach? Through to having people be really passionate and engaged with it, such that they understand the vision, they know the direction, they're prepared to do whatever it takes to make the business a success. And it doesn't matter if you're a tiny little motel, all the way up to 5-star deluxe. It's the same metrics, same parameters, same techniques. Once you've got a team fully on side and ready to do whatever it takes, the business will go from strength to strength. But unless you go through that, you're just going to be throwing money and not efficiently creating the results that you need to succeed.
Simon, thank you so much for your time today. I've really enjoyed chatting to you. It was fantastic listening to you on stage the other week, but really enjoyed chatting to you today. If you were to say one thing, just the one thing, somebody to start, if they're a bit stuck, they're a bit not moving their business forward the way they wanted to, or they're frustrated they can't find the one thing, what would you say to them?
Well, but things that can be done immediately is recognise that you hired professionals to do a professional job. So in a controlled way, get out of their way and let them do the job. Usually there's far too much bureaucracy, red tape and rules and regulations around how you don't want people to do things. So create a situation, a set of solutions about how your employees can get results. Because if they get results, they get more satisfaction. If they get more satisfaction, they'll be prepared to put more energy and enthusiasm and passion into what they do. And that's always going to be good for you and for your guests.
Contribution revolution, which is really the human, sort of the natural law of people almost, is like, all of us want to make a contribution, but we want to contribute to something that we believe in, and we know that our contribution is going to make a difference. And finally, we want to be appreciated for that. Now, there might be a numerical appreciation, a financial appreciation, but actually the appreciation that really counts is me saying, Simon, thank you very much for doing this wonderful talk with me today. The difference it's going to make to my audience is to understand that actually investing in your people can work, it can have results, and the results are lasting and they really do work. That's appreciation. But then once they've done that, they're much more likely to go and contribute again.
Right, but let's be clear about investment, because you mentioned money, and that's a hugely important word. We're not talking about spending a lot of money. We might not even be talking about spending any money when we talk about investment. What we're talking about is figuring out what the real reason is that things aren't working the way you want them to work. And by the way, that could be your approach to whatever is going on. And just through collaboration, dialogue, and trust, you can do a huge amount. That doesn't mean having to spend a lot of money. And that's what makes me smile, Riley, because that's significantly more affordable, and we get you a lot more mileage than the money you had to spend on bringing in that celebrity chef and renovating the restaurant.
So thank you so much. To you, my audience, people who are listening to the interview, I hope that what you've heard from Simon today has inspired you to get in touch with people. I will put Simon's details on there, not because I think him as a competitor. What you just then is collaborator, and I'm passionate about delivering hospitable service to businesses and teaching them how they can get hospitable services from their staff. And you've got a complete system now for taking a major brand hotel or a branded hotel to an independent hotel. And the lessons you've taught, I think, are relevant in a vast number of businesses. So I would be happy to put contact details down for you as well. And guys, if you want to get in touch with me, the email address is at the bottom. Click the button to get a conversation with me and let's talk. But Simon, thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. I've
Great,
enjoyed it
Simon.
enormously.
Bye for now.
Thank you.